Professional rugby player, now one of New Zealand's top sports psychologists, Zane Winslade. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, mate. Good to be here.
So we're going to crack right into one of the tough questions. What are your top three psychology tips for coaches?
So, the big one I think first is around failure, because I see lots of coaches being really scared of whatever they're doing at training, not working, or the players not doing it well, how they want to do it. So the coaches are kind of like really focused on like this activity or game or drill or whatever they want to call it, his um doesn't work because there's players making mistakes. They get annoyed and they don't like that. So there's a sort of tendency for coaches to want things to like look perfect, but we don't, like, learning doesn't actually work like that. So it's about building failure into your trainings and embracing it and acknowledging it and letting players, like, you want to be encouraging courage, um, rather than fear of making mistakes. So from the psychology point of view, it's like if you can have players willing to try stuff, especially at training, um, and not be sort of like scared of trying stuff because they don't want to fail because the coach gets really angry and says this is rubbish and start again. Like, that sort of thing is really harmful for their own sort of approach to the game. So like the big one is, can you find an opportunity like where they maybe stuffed up and really like make that a positive for them? Like, oh, that, like, you went for that pass there, it didn't come off, but man, that was the perfect decision. Let's just keep going with this, keep failing until we get it right type approach. Which you see in like sports like skating and, like gymnastics, where their trainings are just fail, 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 and then they finally get it. Whereas rugby coaches, they do, and other team sports like that, they're kind of like, right, let's do this and make it look really good, and then get angry at them if it doesn't. So yeah, man, that's the first one, a long explanation, but embrace failure in your trainings, and actually normalize it, and encourage it and make it what you want. You obviously don't want it in the games, but it's going to happen, and you don't want that fear of failure to be what motivates them to
Have, have you any
learn things.
have you had any examples of that? How a coach has sort of worked that into their trainings in real life?
Um, yeah, well, I don't know if it was like inadvertently, like they were just uh that sort of person, but I have seen like the good coaches, um, that really criticize effort, lack of effort. But when people are putting an effort in and stuffing up, they're not like, "Ah, do it again, this is useless," like that. It's like, all right, we're getting there. There's this kind of positive like encouragement along the way. And I've seen it in reviews. Some of the best teams have been in, wherein like they're reviewing a game on video and they'll point out a mistake and talk about how good that decision was, and how, like, this is how close we are because if that pass connects, that's a try. So awesome, you know, not
Yeah,
like no one's gonna. I hope no coaches are gonna point at a bad pass and go, "This is really bad. You shouldn't have done that." But maybe definitely don't want, like, don't want to be doing that. But even
I think
pointing
we've
out
all had those
mistakes and
types of
going,
coaches.
"What's that?"
I think we've all had those types of coaches.
Yeah, yeah. So that's what I've seen. That's the good stuff where you're like, okay, um, they're saying that failure is okay. Um, Effort is most important, and then they can go out being courageous. They can't. If you want players to be courageous when you play, and you should from a psychological point of view, then you've got to make sure that they're allowed to fail in your trainings. It's probably the best way. Yeah,
I like it. And number two,
making the environment real supportive. Like, this is from I guess the um, psychological point of view, is that you want players that feel supported in the environment. And so, like, yes, you want to really push them and challenge them. Like, and that's probably one thing that coaches, they kind of like flinch a bit and they go, yeah, but you gotta push them. You gotta really challenge them and to get the best out of them. Like, yep, that's true, but that doesn't mean you don't support them at the same time. So though both of those things have got to be high. And when I say support, it's kind of just like being there for them, listening to them, getting to know them, being a good person, not just a coach. And then ultimately you're going to get, when you've got good relationships, you're going to get way better results. And yeah, it should be common sense, but that's a big one that that coaches just don't think about. So they're like, how can we push this team to win? But it should be really, how can I push them really hard, and how can I support them like better than I've supported anyone before in my coaching? That's what you should be striving for. So both of those things are met, and that's again, it's enabling them to like be free with who they are, because they know that, yep, this environment has got a bit of edge to it. It's competitive, it's challenging, but also I'm allowed to go for it. I'm allowed to like get the most out of myself, because I know that there's a guy there or a girl or whatever it is that will support me along this journey. You know, they'll know that I make mistakes, and they'll help lift me up, and all that. They'll listen to me. They know who I am. They'll let me be myself. They'll let me make mistakes. They'll let me say things that maybe are wrong and not be criticized for it. You know, all that sort of stuff. It's like, people might call it psychological safety or whatever, but it's just that. I guess it's that relationship side of things. And to summarize it again, for the soundbite, it would be support your players as much as you challenge them, through listening, through good relationships. Yeah.
And like take a general like club coach who only gets a couple of trainings a week and doesn't actually get much time to actually speak with individuals. Is there any good tips you've seen coaches do to facilitate that communication, creating those one-on-one, those connections between player and coach?
Yeah, you just got to treat it like realistically. Your approach has got to be, I've just got to find, like, maybe in this month, I've got to find a time to have a 5-minute chat with every player. And that might be the realistic target. But if you're deliberately setting those targets, then hopefully it's more likely that you'll have those little moments. Hey, can you just hang behind for 5 seconds? I'm keen to catch up, as you're walking back after the training, or who's there earlier. I'll just pull them aside and go, oh, tell me how things are going, and how's the family? What's going on in your life? And um, they'll notice that. They'll go away feeling better, and more comfortable at training. So it's little things. But acknowledge that it's hard as a club coach, because you're like, man, you got an hour and a half or whatever. 3 hours in some countries, but it shouldn't be that long. You're training. Um, Trainings are short. You got Tuesday, Thursday. But and that's why if you don't prioritize it, it doesn't happen, and the players sort of just turn up and don't feel like the coach is really supportive of them or encouraging for them, or knows them as a person, and so they don't feel as kind of connected to the whole sort of, the training, the team, the coach. Yeah, but tricky. So I would say scheduling times, seeing if you can set the target of, not just talking to those ones who you're comfortable chatting with, asking questions. Yeah,
And I've
bringing
actually
them up
seen,
maybe after
I've
as
seen
well.
some
Sorry.
coaches actually keep like it's almost like a journal of each player, because
Yeah,
they obviously have so many players to look after, and just after each little chat they write a few things down so they can
yeah,
remember, and
yeah,
it comes across. Have you seen anything like that, or can you expand on
yeah,
something
yeah.
like that?
I haven't actually from coaches, but like I know some people who are naturally coaches who are naturally good at it, and some have to actually work on that. So if you got the self-awareness to know which sort of coach you are, then hopefully you can put some of that in place. If you're someone that gets caught up in your own stuff and you forget to like have those conversations, or you forget what their kids' names are, or their whatever, their partner, or their, like, that's awesome to write that down, I reckon. So I haven't, I'm trying to think of examples that I've seen with um in my work with people doing that. But yeah, I think people just default back to how they are, and if it's not their full-time job, then they kind of just like, and they volunteer. It's easy just to go, oh, just turn up and do what I already do. But I'm saying it's that important that if you are that type of person that maybe forgets about this relationship side of things with your players, you definitely should be doing something like that. Setting some targets, taking notes, like, and you're thinking, oh, yep, so and so's struggling with this at the moment. They're just got a job interview tomorrow. I'll just jot that down so that I can ask them next training how it went. remember to do that. And then on your training plan, you might have those little notes there.
Yeah.
Mm.
And just going back, like there's a really good quote. If you want to change somebody's life, start by changing their day.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's something I often see with coaches is how we go into training. If we're not in a good
Mm.
state, so we haven't slept, bad day at work, that can often carry into the training. And we see
Mm.
it just with shortness, they might get angry because the ball's dropped and, something happens and there's like a really negative reaction. Do you have
Yeah.
any ways coaches can just sort of change that mindset before training, just to help them just to go, okay, I'm here
Yeah.
to help the players?
Yeah, and that's important because your um like kind of job is to have a consistent amount of um sort of energy and presence at training and not be sort of up and down. And then you don't want players to like not know what sort of coach they're gonna get. That's one thing I've heard, like working with individuals. It's like it's just like one day you do something and he's like snaps your head off, and the next day he's just like sweet as and chill about it. And like that's really confusing if there's no consistency there. So then, like that's like someone's got a abusive parent and they come home, and if he's had a few drinks, then it's going to beat them up, and if it or another day he's going to have a laugh with them, and that's a really unstable place for a kid to grow up, and damaging. And if you're kind of like as a coach, some days you're turning up with all your shit going on and just snapping people's heads off and angry and all that, then that's pretty confusing if the next day you're having a laugh and high-fiving and all that sort of thing. So real important point, like um sitting, if you can, like everyone's busy, but taking something like 5 minutes and going, what is the type of person that I want to be today? And hopefully that's consistent every training. And then having whatever skills that you might use, doing a little bit of meditation just to take some time to let go of that brain, the monkey mind or whatever, that all these sorts of stresses going on in, and get to that place where you then really explicitly say to yourself, I'm this sort of coach, which I'm this, this, and this, and I'm going to go and do that today. Um, yeah, because I have coached. Obviously, one of my little things was sometimes I'd feel a lot of pressure about not maybe not knowing enough, feeling insecure about like, what if I ask this and I don't really know? But in reality, that's not really an issue as a coach, because you can put that to the players, and also you don't have to know everything because you realize that's just an ego thing. So then I would always remind myself at every training, you don't have to have all the answers. You're allowed to make mistakes, and then that was my little thing, like okay, just like and then it sort of freed me up a little bit to be myself. But it took a while to learn that, because
And
if you're carrying the burden of the man who knows everything, it's pretty hard place to coach from.
yeah,
Yeah,
I had that problem once, is that I found out very quickly it's best to say I don't know, and I'll get back to you
yeah,
next training, because if your players find out very quickly if you're lying to them, and then you lose all
yeah,
that trust. If you had trust to start with, it goes pretty quickly.
yeah.
And so for your number three, best
Number
psychology
three,
coach.
we finally got there. Yep. Number three would be around, because this is my interest area, is around skill learning, and the psychological sort of processes, I guess, and how we learn. So what coaches, I would say, need to realize is that learning doesn't always come from your mouth. Um, you are not the giver of all knowledge and skill, and that players can learn implicitly. They can learn through playing and not know that they're learning, and that's okay. And we need to embrace that as coaches. So it's too often that and this is throughout our education system as well, is that we sort of think that all learning happens by people saying what we're going to learn today, telling everyone what they're learning, and then getting people to tell everyone at the end what they've learned. Um, but actually, there's a whole lot of other shit going on that we're unconscious of, and it's just like a lot of the skill-based stuff. That's what happens, like there's all these so many different things that you're um, I guess your sensory register, like the stuff that your senses are bringing in and inputting into your mind. There's thousands of them, and then like there's only a few that you're conscious of in any moment. So there's a whole lot going on, and that when you respond, you can still be learning in situations without actually consciously thinking about it. So kind of embracing that is like my yeah. I mean, my recommendation for coaches is that if you're playing a game where they're truly like into it and they're really absorbed in it, and you sit there and go, what's the aim here? Sometimes it's okay if they're just like going for it. They're still learning, like because it's a team game, they're connecting with each other, they're learning all the little parts, the little cues that they know that like when he steps like that and lifts his elbow like that, that's when the ball's gonna come at this height or whatever. It, like might not be the best example, but you're picking up cues by playing with each other together, that don't have to be like, oh, watch for this when the defender does this, that means you should do this. It's like all that stuff that's happening. So there's time and place for everything, but I think coaches, because they kind of want to do a good job, they want to try harder, and then they try harder by making it everything like this is all the stuff I'm going to give you, and it's all laid out. But I would say embrace the free play a little bit more, let them play. That was a kind of a motto for me of coaching, just let them play it, and you can't do that at like line out practice and so noisy. You
Yeah,
can't do that.
we see that a
What's
lot
that?
with like the new current craze is learning through games,
Yeah,
and there's some people are pushing like nearly, 80 to 100% of all training should just be games.
yeah,
What's your
yeah.
stance on that at the moment?
Yeah, I think that's right. And but well, you've got to be creative. Like you want max repetitions. So like if you're playing a 15 versus 15, the reality is like people might touch the ball 3 or 4 times. Um, like not that the time on the ball is everything in rugby, but like you need to have um like small-sided stuff so that they're getting heaps and heaps of passing, drawing passing, as example, heaps of opportunities to do loads of the skills. So like using small-sided games that football does really well, not just like, oh, how can we have a big full team game of touch, which is also good learning, but yeah, I'm totally all in on the games-based stuff. I don't think there's zero like um place for skill, like deliberate skill repetition stuff, like especially obviously for line out throwing, goal kicking, all that stuff. It's real important. But like so much of the interplay, the team stuff should be just done in games because it's more fun, more motivating. They'll actually learn just, but even though people, again, going back to that point, coaches think they're not because they haven't told them what they're learning all the time for every single thing, but they are. You got to trust it. It's cohesion in a team, and it's a whole lot of unsaid stuff. But yeah,
And through skill acquisition, I've had many debates about whether they should have a base to start with before you go into the games. Like just take catch pass. Is it important that they at least understand what a good catch pass is before the game, or do you think they would learn quicker just by playing the games, having a lot more game time and actually getting the
it'd
learning the
probably take
technique?
longer. Yeah, it'd probably take longer just playing the games because you obviously don't get as many passes. So I'd say there could be a argument. Like I would say in a perfect world, they'd just mainly do it through games if you had the time. So the whole like thing about whole like say New Zealand rugby, I'll say past tense used to be so dominant, because it's kind of on par with about 5 other teams at the moment. But the the reason I reckon is because of all the touch and the rugby and the bull rush and stuff that's played at like lunchtimes at school and things like that and all around, and everyone's exposed to a rugby ball all the time. So, um, but I don't think coaches have that time, and I think it's probably a bit of a balance.
Yeah.
So in terms of balancing your skill work and your game stuff, I don't know the answer, like what a perfect would be. I do think the skills are better when they're learned on, like it takes longer, but you always learn them in the context of the decision that's been made. like the playing touch and stuff all the time as you're growing up, you're kind of learning all those things. Like you understand a draw and pass before some coach comes along and goes, this is how you draw and pass. You look at the guy in the eyes, you run towards him, and then like all the timing stuff that you've learned it implicitly. And that means it's more robust and it's less likely to fail under pressure. We know that. So the research shows if you learn implicitly, so you haven't been told how to do it, you just sort of figured it out, then you're less likely to overthink that when you're under pressure because you don't really have like the pathways in your brain that of the sort of conscious decision that you're going to do. You don't have that. It's just automatic. It's just like walking. You just do it. Like, and that's kind of that would be the ideal thing if you had the most amount of time with your teams. You'd just be like, all right, everyone's going to figure out how to do these things by playing the game. But yeah, I don't know I wouldn't know the perfect answer. There is a place for that skill we're learning to speed it up, but you got to be careful when you're doing it in isolation and not including the decision, because a perfect spiral pass, but badly timed, is way worse than a slightly ugly pass but perfectly timed to the person. Like, and that's what you got to always think about. Like, is this, what do I want here? The perfect looking pass, or just the right pass, or a good enough one to put the guy in space, as an example. So, and often it's probably a little bit, probably a little bit too much skill stuff. But it is hard. I don't know what the perfect balance would look like. Yeah, just make sure you're doing games, and so there's context, so they're learning decisions as well as skills at the same time.
So around those games, have you seen a couple of games that you really like in the rugby context?
Oh, I like all like little games where you got like little 4-on-5s or whatever, and they sort of where it's continuous and it can just keep going. It just depends on the objective. Like even if you are working on the whole team working together, there's all sorts of ways you can modify the field, make it smaller, make it bigger, and that's training different aspects. Like we had this issue with the netball team I was working with here, and one of the training places that they used was too small. The court was actually too small, like it was smaller than the regulation netball court. And then so they were like stressing and like looking for a full size court, and there was cost issues and stuff. But in my head, I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Like, imagine if you could train on a small court the whole time. How good it would be when that space is suddenly available to you, like so much more of it. So their speed of pass and everything would have got so much better because they would have had to be playing all these games against each other, because a lot of netball is that. Yeah, so stuff like that, modifying the field size to get the players thinking and learning through just you implementing that, I guess, constraint, how you'd call it, or in coaching lingo. But that's there's so many examples, and this is like, don't be afraid to come up with your own stuff, because sometimes that will fail, and that's okay. And you can say, hey guys, I want you to try things and fail, and I'm going to try things and fail. And that that training, we tried that type of game, it didn't work. You can always use that and go, yeah, well, sometimes we try shit and it doesn't work. And same, you're modeling what you want to see from your players as well. Yeah, play around with it, I'd say to them, sit down and go, you can have a beer after training with your other coaches and go, well, what do we want them to do more? If they're young, it might be, oh, we want them to get the ball into that space a bit more, and they're not really seeing it. Okay, so how are we going to do that? And then you just have brainstorm, like, how are we going to do that in the game? Like, oh, well, let's make it 5 points if they score on the wing, or, they've got to have classic ones for kids, they've got to have 3 passes before they score and all that stuff, man. It's not necessarily new for people, but I think it's real good within that. So not necessarily any favorite games, but just little ways of tweaking it to get the result you want.
So you've coached some Olympic athletes. What were some of the challenges you had with them, and how did you overcome it?
Well, just speaking elite sport in general, I guess the big challenges on the big stages, so the big competitions and things like that. Often, obviously, if you're traveling, there's the travel side of things. There's And what I mean by that is like all the challenges that everyone knows about, like the time zone things, the different foods, the different hotels, the different stuff like that. So what we do is we'll sit down and just talk about all of those and just make sure we've got a coping plan for all the stuff that can go wrong. It's not rocket science, but like it's pretty comforting to know that when you go into a place that you've got a plan for stuff, like shit can happen. And yeah, so that's a big one for them, is like anyone going to pinnacle events. Yeah, so that can we sit down and go, what are we going to face over here? Oh, the heat, the cold, the food, the the walk from the hotel, the whatever it is, the language, and just so that you don't have any little mind fucks along the way that you still might get them, but it's kind of like, well, I've got a bit of a plan for a lot of stuff, so I'm going to go away feeling pretty confident. I might sleep a little better at night knowing that I've got a plan for stuff that can go wrong. So that's what you often work on for a high level. But other than that, like some of the stuff in 12-year-old gymnasts' minds is pretty similar to what's going on with the sort of elite professional rugby player. Like, we have struggles as humans, and everyone's situation can be unique, but also the same intensity of feeling for young kids as it is for people at the higher level. Because everyone's different, some people have so much anxiety they find it hard to go to school in the morning, but and someone going to compete in an Olympic final might have a pretty high level of anxiety as well, but everyone's different. So we don't know, we can't just say, oh, these people, because they're competing at the elite level of sport, they're under the most stress. It's it's relative to the type of brain they've got and the person they are, and all that sort of, the genetics, I mean by that. So yeah, there's a lot of similarities between working with, you know, actual. I think the hardest work I would have done is when I was doing my internship like 8 years ago, working with the B team in school volleyball, because the ones who are in the A team, they're pretty confident and they can execute the skills when they want to, more or less. And they got to that A team level, and it's the ones that have got all this stuff going on, and the sport, and they're juggling everything, and they've got all these issues that's holding them back, and because so in many ways it's probably easier to work with a elite level than some of the lower levels, because if they've made it to that far, then they've probably got some pretty solid coping strategies, and yeah, they're probably all right, and have a good foundation. Whereas the young kids, they're on the way out. They don't necessarily have any of that, so they're far harder to work with. Well, yeah. I don't know if I'm still answering your question, but going on a bit of a rant.
Yeah, the coping mechanisms is quite an interesting one. Like you do a lot of work with netball and rugby teams. Do you have any sort of team mechanisms, things you can do with teams to calm them
Mm.
down, etc.?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, um, I don't have a set thing like that I'll teach every team. Like, you just got to get a feel for what the team um, would like, or what would sort of work for them. Um, Obviously, utilizing our breathing and our mindful breath, and doing that as a team. You see everyone doing it now, probably a little bit incorrectly, the way they're breathing, but things like that are really, they're not magic, but it's just a way of often of resetting. I'll teach like centering, which is kind of taking that slow breath, but really feeling your center of gravity and balance over both feet. And you're sort of, it's an Aikido thing, I think, originally. So it's all about the energy, centering your energy in your center. We all have verbal cues that they've trained at a lot through the training. So if you're wanting to increase the tempo, there might be a call for that, where how everyone's got to lift that effort. If you want everyone's to calm down, they'll have a certain call for that. Yeah, I'm just thinking about the team stuff as well. Yeah, having, like it can be quite common in rugby now, but in other sports as well, theming the seasons. So you having a story that ties the group together, that kind of they are sort of in on, but others aren't. And that can kind of make a collective sort of feeling of being together. And then you have words associated with that. Um,
that
Yeah.
tribalism. Have you been
Yeah.
in any teams working with any teams that have had a really good theme?
Well, we did one with a team that like was just recently surfing, so big wave surfing. So it was kind of because I'm a surfer as well, I was kind of into that. Um, so yeah, there was kind of like a whole lot of language around being courageous, taking the drop on a huge wave. The biggest wave of your life is going to be pretty scary, but it's also the opportunity for the greatest ride of your life. So acknowledging that the sort of precipice of that you get at where you're both almost falling to your death or succeeding in everything you've ever wanted. Um, Pretty dramatic, but like that's the imagery of like, hey, we're going towards this, like we're paddling into this and we're going and we're standing, like, and we might wipe out. We know that, but we're in. And so that was kind of that whole, yeah, we built that whole story, and then the language um was all based around that. So, things aren't going well, you're getting ragdolled. Um, things are going well, you're in the barrel. Like it was all kind of built in, like, and charging, and um was built into the language. So he was talking about charging, and um yeah. So that was a cool example for me because the surfing. But I think people don't really get what they're doing. Coaches, oh, hey, loads of teams are theming their season, but all you're doing is creating a sort of metaphor or a story to bring about the, like, um in some way, the values that you want in your team, but also like the sort of like the mindset you want them to have. So you're just using story, of which there's so much, to create that. And it's a common that everyone understands and knows. And that's getting that message away across that way is so much better than you just telling them. So, sitting down and going, man, and maybe a player's like shitting themselves, they're nervous, and you could say, well, yeah, this is the biggest wave we've ever surfed, like, instead of something else. And then they go instantly, they know that story, they know that metaphor, and they know that they've got to be courageous here. And it's okay to feel that. It's because they could wipe out, um, and get ragdolled and, yeah, held under for 5 minutes and nearly drowned. Like, yeah, it's understandable that you're feeling those nerves. So you got that way of, and some coaches, it's a big ask. I'm not like, I know you probably, listeners are probably more club and school coaches, but you just can have you can build little stories into trainings. It doesn't have to have a big theme that you work on the whole year. You can just go, you could start a training with a story, and, like, say you go, well, the mindset this week, um, we're taking on the top team, all right, and we're ranked pretty low. So what's our mindset going to be? And you go find a little story in history where the underdog has won. And then you can go, hey guys, well, it might only take 5 minutes. So you might have a little presentation that goes, this is the battle of so and so, and they came in and blah blah blah, and, tell the story if you're comfortable, or get someone else to, and then go, well, and I see a lot of similarities today, and so we're going to take this. This is our call, and that might be the battle cry or whatever, and then build that into the week. And then the next week you might do, that does take a little bit extra work, but I think it's so much better. We, as humans, we learn, we just connect through story, around the campfire. So just using stories in your training to get the message, rather than going, hey guys, you can't back down. This is the biggest team. It's a chance to knock them over. It's the David Goliath, even that's the story. Yeah. So it's such a cool way. There's so many stories in history where you can just like build, real emotion and connection with your team, rather than just being the guy who stands there telling everyone what he wants to see or she wants to see on the, in the field. Yeah, but I love it, mate. It's a cool sort of thing that coaches are doing, but I think they don't really understand. They just go, oh, I'm going to do a theme, because other teams do it who are good. But really, I think you're utilizing story, which is a, um, known way of how humans connect and relate to each other and understand the world. That's all we do, is we create stories to try and figure and understand things. So yeah, I could just keep going on, mate, but I think, you guys will get to your listeners. Oh, yeah, I get the point.
Well, it's theming's. It's a very I find it's a very Kiwi thing. Like
Yeah,
it's like it's nearly every rugby team in New Zealand's doing it, but
yeah,
you go to Europe and it's a very new thing, and
yeah.
I think it is actually really interesting because it does work,
Mm,
but it hasn't seemed to caught on to to everyone else quite as strongly
yeah,
as we use it.
yeah,
And I guess the curious thing is like I've seen a lot of yearly ones where they've created a story and their
yeah.
whole
I've
theming
seen.
is throughout the whole
Yeah,
year. All their moves are related to that theme. But I
yeah,
really like the idea of even just like the weekly ones and how
yeah,
I guess how just the club coach can just take something that is so simple and wouldn't take long to
yeah,
find the concept, but
yeah,
to apply it.
yeah,
Just trying to think of ways that some simpler ways that a coach could do it.
yeah. It takes a bit of extra work, um, but it doesn't have to. Like, yeah, you can take stories from history, or you can take stories from sorry, you can fictional stuff. Like this is a story, blah blah blah. It doesn't. Yeah, it just requires a little bit. But with AI, like if you just get jumped on like
ChatGPT, I need
yeah,
an
an AI
themes
tool
for
and
it.
go, well, we've got this game coming up, and the mindset I really want, I'm concerned about the players being a little bit complacent or whatever, or too scared. Give me some give me some examples or stories that I could build into my training and theme this week around. Um, yeah,
Mate, that's the
and
best
look,
piece of advice I've heard for a long time. It's actually, I
yeah,
hadn't even thought about that, but that's absolutely brilliant. Little cheat
yeah.
code
I
for
mean, we don't. There's
weekly
a
theming.
lot of the thinking stuff now it gets taken away. We don't need to do it, but you still need to like research it and know you can't just do it half-hearted. Yeah.
How to
Um.
apply it to what you're wanting to get out of that week, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
You're like, if you don't know it, like oh, King Henry V, guys, he took an army, the Battle of Agincourt, and he can't remember. The players will be like, what the? So yeah, some don't be like that's what the problem with AI. Sometimes go, oh sweet, I got it. This has been good, and then try and deliver it because you don't know it. It's not, yeah. So it still takes a bit of work, but it helps with the ideas thing, I reckon.
yeah, nah, that's great little tip to. I'm actually gonna, after this, I'm actually gonna give it a go and see what I can find.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, before you brought up values, do you have any
Mm.
non-negotiables that you expect from your athletes?
Mm. I guess that's kind of more of a yeah. As a coach, I would um yeah. I mean the value stuff in particular, like it's kind of a little bit. It's never really hit home for I don't think for players because every team sort of sits down at the start of the season and they come up with all these words like respect each other and commit to the team and all that sort of stuff. And then they all go, yeah, yeah, we're all in agreement. And then it's sort of gone. And that's why linking it to a story is way more powerful if you can. Um, but like in terms of non-negotiables, it's kind of not, oh, we do all these values because that might help us win. So I think some coaches actually probably do. Like that's why they do it. They go, oh yeah, teams have values, and those teams win. So we're going to do that too. Um, it can't be the intention. Like you're literally making a transaction when a value is being a good human. Ultimately, there are ways of being that are good, and we should be good because it's good to be a good person, not because it's what it's what's going to help us connect as a team and then win. That's the big one. So I know you said like not a non-negotiable, but like the way that stuff's talked about um, needs to change because it's like something's bigger than this game we're playing, and that is we're only on this planet for a brief amount of time. So why don't we just be good people for the sake of being good people? And there's a chance for us to do that because being a good person is important. Not because it's a transaction like, oh, let's all be good so that we win. And then like 3 games in, you're losing and you're out of contention. And then what? You all become assholes or it's like just do it because that's a good thing. Um, yeah, so I'm really against that. So yeah, I think a non-negotiable from a coach, is just really encouraging that. Hey, we want good people. And if you have that impact on someone as a coach and they become whatever it is, it's just a kinder person or a more understanding or self-aware or sympathetic or what trying to think of ways, but a more courageous or whatever. If they come develop that, then you've had way more impact than you think. Like way more impact on their life, and yeah, we talk about it a bit, but you don't see it enough in practice. Coaches often talk about how they want to grow people and develop them, and then they get to training and they go, "It's all about the win." So yeah, that's I guess a non-negotiable is like you should encouraging people to be good people, and have good values. Um,
Yeah, I don't
yeah,
think you can ask much better than that. It's just like
yeah,
All Blacks, just no dickhead rule. Just
yeah. Simple way.
yeah,
I think when I was playing, I can't even remember what team, but it was kind of like, "I'll just be a good bastard." Sweet. It's pretty straightforward. Um, Someone was our line, and it was down in Tasman. We were like, "Oh, is that is that being a good bastard?" No, probably not. Okay, sweet. Stop doing that.
yeah,
Simple.
simple.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And one of the big things I've been hearing lately from, especially from ex-professional players, is around honesty from
Yeah.
coaches. How
From
does that tie in
coaches.
with your work?
Yeah. I mean, players obviously need to be treated with honesty, even that when that's really hard for them to hear. So how it ties in with my work is I get all the players coming to me going, "I don't know where the frick I stand. I don't know whether I'm going to get any game time. I don't know why I'm not playing. I don't know why I'm on the bench. He's picking on me. She's picking on me. Um, like all the stuff." And you're like, man, if they could just be honest, the coach, then that person would be gutted, but then they wouldn't have that unknown, like, where do I stand? Where do I sit? And often when I'm talking to them, it's like encouraging them to then have the conversation with the coach to engage that. But they probably should be getting it from the coach without having to ask them. So yeah, honesty. If you want your players to be free of um, confusion and doubt and things like that about where they sit and what their role is and all of that, just trying to find as many chances to just be as honest as possible. Even though that really it can be hard. So yeah, I imagine it'd be pretty tough to always do. When needed, obviously you're not going to be like, "Hey mate, I think you're a dickhead. Um, you're I don't like you at all." If you actually think that, you don't need to be expressing it. But it's not like you might find some of the behaviors that you don't like and say, "Hey, one thing I don't like is that when you turn up to training, and your body language is terrible, and you start bitching and moaning about people. And to be honest, I don't want to pick you because of that." Something like that. So rather than, you know, just being on it, saying, "Oh, I hate this dude. Oh, I've got to be honest." Sweet, go and tell him. Just point out the behavior is not the person.
Yeah,
Be honest about. Yeah. Yeah, man.
yeah. Okay. Last
Sweet.
question. Last question to wrap it up. You came through as a professional player, then you obviously got into the very heavily into sports psychology. If you could go back to your younger self, what are a couple of key points you would have liked to have learned maybe back when you were sort of 18, 19?
Whoa. Well, it probably cycles back to, I think, the first thing is just try more stuff and be willing to put your hand up and be willing to fail and be uncomfortable and all that. Like you sort of just kind of get you sort of don't want to stand, like me anyway. And I didn't want to stand out. Didn't want to, sorry, not stand out in like game sense, but like I didn't want to say stuff. I didn't want to work on certain things because I wasn't good at them. You didn't want to um, really push yourself in certain aspects where it made you afraid. So yeah, that would be it. It's trying to sort of encourage myself to take more risks, I guess, would be the one. take more risks, get used to failing and keeping on. Because a lot of my motivation, and it's like not just me, loads of people, but it's like avoidance motivation. So avoiding uncomfortable situations. We want to do the opposite. We should be sitting down, and I'd sit down with the 18-year-old me and go, "What's the things that make you uncomfortable?" Sweet. All right. Well, are some of those making you avoid important things that you want? Oh, yeah, some of them. Yep. Sweet. Okay. Let's go towards these and then go and do that shit that's hard. Just needing someone like that to be, in your ear. That's what I'd go back and do.